I'm thrilled to be here. This is, I feel like, a bit of a stacked room full of friends and fellow filmmakers and the best dog in documentary filmmaking, Miss Junebug. If you haven't met her, you should meet her. So as Ken said, I'm Darcy. I think I was called here today because I'm a documentary film producer. I am an almost lifelong Southerner. I did spend a few years out of the South. And as usually is the case these days, you feel like you get called to do these things when you're about to be put out to pasture, but I hope that's not true. Despite that, this is actually only, and I don't know if all my friends really realize this, only my 4th year. I'm about to hit the end of my 4th year as a full-time documentary producer. It's my main job. I have a small production company in New Orleans with 2 colleagues and friends who I really love and value. Before that, I was the executive director of the New Orleans Video Access Center, which is a really amazing community media nonprofit. Before that, I was a public school teacher. I taught 7th and 8th grade Louisiana history, civics, and revolution through the Civil War in New Orleans, both before and after Katrina. Before that, I was a waitress. I worked at a post-production studio. I did a lot of temp work. And I've always worked in and around films, but I think especially because there's a lot of emerging filmmakers here in the South, I think it's really important to note that I'm really only on my 4th year of doing this as my job, and I'm almost 50 years old. So take it easy on yourselves. And as you do, when I left Novak, I'd been ED for almost 10 years, and I went to produce full-time. I was able to do that because I have a very supportive partner. And I had some films that had been in fundraising mode and were like ready to have salary to pay me. But nonetheless, thanks to my mother, I had a bit of a panic attack. It was 2020, there were no in-person film festivals. I wasn't exactly sure how to be a producer. I was gonna finish the projects I had, but like, how do you get your name out there? How are people gonna know what you're doing? So I answered a call and took a job as a field producer doing like COVID tests and passing out releases on a small film called Descendant. I did it for a few weeks, and I really, I love Margaret. The whole production team was crew from New Orleans, so it was really great. But my friends were starting to tease me that I had just negotiated myself into a deep demotion from an executive director of a nonprofit to a COVID manager. A few weeks after that, though, because of an event like the one you're going to be at today, I got a phone call. I had met Beth Osisic at Hulu through the Hot Docs Forum when we were pitching Naila Jefferson's film Commuted. Hulu was never going to greenlight that film. It was not really in any way on their slate or a possibility, but she liked me. And so she put me on a list, literally, and a few days later I was interviewing for a job as a producer on a film that became Look at Me, XXXTentacion, which was on Hulu, directed by Sabah Faloyan. And since then I've been really busy. I've been working on commercial projects, I've been working on small local projects, I've been working on projects for public media. And I'm stringing together, as best I can, a real good living where I get to make films as my job. And that's really exciting. And I try to remember at times like these when the landscape is weird and dark and unsure, that the fact that I can make a living as a storyteller and a filmmaker in the American South is something I should be really grateful for. So things were rocking and rolling. I got picked up by a black car for the premiere of Look at Me to go to the airport for South by. My husband was like, is this how it is now? And I was like, I don't think it's gonna be like this forever. And I was really kind of getting used to the abundance of the documentary landscape a couple years ago. There was just no end to projects that were coming across my desk. It felt like it was, I was kind of good at fundraising for films, and I was really feeling myself. And then this year happened. I don't know, round of applause if this year has happened to you in the same way that it happened to me. Okay. I am always willing to be scrappy and be indie, but I really it startled me. I was surprised at how quickly I'd gotten used to a sensibility that I was going to be operating as a producer at a certain level. It didn't take very long for me to get used to abundant budgets, easy meetings, lots of green lights. And I had expectations that I was building both into my personal and professional life, my budgets, my travel plans, the scope and breadth of the projects that I was taking on, and the money I was going to need to do it. And I thought it was going to be, plentiful. And this year I had to stop and take a break because it wasn't plentiful this year, and it wasn't abundant. And even though I'm still doing, in my opinion, great projects, there wasn't a kind of free flowing of commercial and otherwise dollars in to support my wild ideas and drag them into place. I really had to start thinking a little more intentionally about what it is that I do. And I had to recall my own words that I say to a lot of young filmmakers, a few of them who are in this room, that we have chosen a very expensive art form to practice. Poetry's free. We are doing an art form that is in the thousands and hundreds of thousands and millions of dollars. And it is an art form that is as much a business as it is a craft. And I had to reflect to myself if I have the intestinal fortitude to actually do this as a job for a living where I'm responsible for making that money work. This summer, I've been calling it summer, 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 because for the first time in a long time, I actually summered. I went kayaking with my sister in the mangrove tunnels in Florida. I was hanging out with my parents, my husband, my dog, not working on every Friday. It was great. And trying to reset my expectations around my work, and reflecting on why exactly I have and why we have continue to try and take on this incredibly difficult work of documentary storytelling and who we're doing it for. So I think I was brought here today because I'm a Southerner, a filmmaker, and I think also it's really important to note that my career has been cultivated with the support of public media throughout. So when I thought about what I wanted to talk with y'all about today, I realized I've been thinking a lot about the idea of the public and public media. This invisible, hard to quantify idea of the public, right? It's a amoebic, borderless audience that we are shouting into the abyss at, frequently with not a real sense of who they are or why we want to reach them sometimes. And yet they're the people for whom we make this work. They're the people about whom and for whom we make this work. And we have to, I think, take these moments when people aren't just throwing projects and money our way to really consider for whom and for how and for why we're doing it. For most of us, it's an audience that's an undefined slice of America. Raise your hand if you've thought to yourself, I want everybody to see my movie. Don't lie. This movie is for everybody. Yeah. So this is undefined slice of America who shares our beliefs in democratic systems, who's seeking to be illuminated, just waiting to just receive what we're going to give them, right? And they're moved, and they're inspired, or they're outraged by the stories that we tell them and the way that we tell them. And facing ourselves outwards towards this public, if we're honest, is an essential part of what we do. Because most of us are here in this room trying to make the public different, trying to move the needle in the public with the stories we tell, trying to tell stories that are from a different point of view than the prevailing narratives about the people we care about. And we're seeking to connect the public to a world they might not have access to from other channels. The public is an idealized Grecian, Roman concept, right? An idea that sits at the center of our own democracy experiment that even when we are struggling with our notions of what America is, we still all fundamentally believe in, right? We all participate in this democratic experiment that is grounded on this idea of a public that is worth it. When we're at our best as storytellers, we're serving the public new and challenging narratives free from the influence of corporate shareholders, theocratic leaders, or reality show grifters, and helping to define a body politic that embraces the real diversity of that public and sees its own nuance, complexity, and contradictions. I'm real proud of that sentence. I'll say it again if anybody wants. I've also been thinking a lot about public school these days. I'm an alumnus of Southern public education all the way through, go Gators. I'm a former teacher, and I'm a sister of a public school teacher in Southwest Florida. I've been thinking about the purpose of public school for a project I'm working on, which is at its heart about equalizing the playing field of life for every citizen and to help in the formation of citizens. And teaching, which is as a profession, it's already one of the hardest jobs that I've ever quit. Being treated with such mean-spirited disrespect and disregard across the country. If you know a teacher or librarian, I'm asking you today to text them, to hug them, to thank them for their work. It's so hard out there. The attempts that I am watching for this project, this is C.J. Hunt's new film, to deconstruct public school education and public school teaching is at its heart about how we value the stories we tell ourselves about who we are as Americans. That's literally what's up for debate in state legislatures across the South, and to be clear, beyond it, in New Hampshire and Iowa, everywhere in this country. Meanwhile, teachers we've been interviewing for this new film are worried that their kids are food insecure. They're trying to teach literacy and numeracy. They're not concerned about these kind of public debates about the narratives we teach. They've got far more urgent issues at hand. So what do we in this room do for those teachers and for those students and for those families? As public media makers, we continue to provide them the access to rigorously reported, well-researched, empathetically created, boundary-pushing, primary source work and analytical essays that help support their understanding of themselves and others inside and outside of the classroom. And that is something, if you don't know about it, public media has been exceptionally good at for decades. I've been thinking a lot about the South as our public square. Raise your hand if you live and work in the South, in the American South in here. Great, welcome. I say a lot these days and during summer, that my greatest pleasure and the reason I love my job is that I have a rich and diverse and varied life tooling around the American South in my little Honda CRV. American made. As I've had to reflect this year that my budgets might not be as big as they were going forward and that I might not get the black car pickup anymore, I've had to reset around what I love about this work and what I'm grateful for. And I really just love driving around the South in Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, Georgia, and Arkansas, to name a few. Finding new towns, new stories, new people, and working with filmmakers to make sense of how these people and places fit into my own understanding of where I'm from and to whom I belong. And I'm realizing that this work of being in space and community with the diversity of people who make up the South, this is what I'm in it for. And further, the more time I spend in small towns, rural communities, and southern cities that have their own cultural singularity, in communities and traditions that vibrate at the same level that I do, or that contradict my assumptions about people and change my ennui and change my mind, the more I realize that the American South is my public square. It's the place I owe my existence to, it's the place that I need to be held accountable, and the place that needs to hold me accountable. The South is full of people who are exploited by the right and often ignored by the left. These are communities with correctional facilities and transnational energy companies as the only major employers in town. These are places where deep pride and ritual and traditions defy or define stereotypes, and these stereotypes that are growing in the absence of thoughtful, nuanced storytelling. So for us as documentary storytellers, as a group writ large, and more specifically as storytellers who consider ourselves to have a love for and responsibility to the places that made us, we're here today in our own public square, this forum, and we're here today to speak to our public. Which brings me to public media. My career in film, my career in film has never not been connected to community-based media or public media. I got my start working on projects like Vicky Funari and Sergio de la Torre's Maquilapolis, which got ITVS funding after 5 application rounds. And yeah, ended up premiering at Tribeca and being broadcast on POV, and had a really long tail. That film came out in 2006, and I was just talking to somebody this summer who teaches it in her class at Brandeis University. So even today, it is really affecting to know that a film that I worked on over 20 years ago is continuing to be taught in classrooms and to be part of a cultural discourse. I also drove that film from Tijuana, San Diego, across the US-Mexico border as part of an early version of what we call Impact Now. And I know it for a fact that that experience has impacted the lives of several women who work in the factories. So the feedback back to the women who participated in that film has also been powerful. Community media has been a huge part of my life. From my first classes I ever took at BAVAC, the Bay Area Video Coalition, that got me started in learning how to very poorly run sound, very poorly edit, and eventually start to produce, to New Orleans Video Access Center and organizations like DCTV and Apple Shop, who take all comers with a story to tell. The Neutral Ground, which is, if you haven't seen it, I'll get you a link, which was premiered in 2021 at Tribeca and was broadcast on POV and was only made possible through support from some surprising partners at first. Our first big money in from public media was actually from CAM, Center for Asian American Media. Thank you, Sapna, for taking my call. But as well, Black Public Media and ITVS came in to make that film possible and get it out to the world. Right now, I'm about a month from premiering Neela Jefferson's film Commuted, which has been created through the support of Black Public Media, ITVS, Afropop, and World Channel, who are helping me bring that out in just a few weeks. Yes, thank you. And also, I'm just because I like to say her name, Sapna Sakya, who's in the back of this room from CAM. I just want to emphasize the part about supporting filmmakers as well. So it's not just the films that I get on screen. Was it 5 years ago in Durham, North Carolina? Probably had a couple glasses of wine in me. I said, Sapna, we need an internship for emerging filmmakers from the South. And she said, you got it. And she got the money and she made it happen. And so today in this room are filmmakers who have work here at the festival that came out of that internship program. So if you were in the sauce, raise your hand. I love you. So I would not be here today as a filmmaker and alum of this festival and others like it without public media, ITVS, the Multicultural Alliances, strands like IndieLens, POV, Afropop, and World Channel, and the people who work there that connect the dots for producers like me. But I don't want to be like too up in the clouds. I'm like anybody else. I want a fancy animated logo. I want a step and repeat. I want a heavy piece of metal. I want a Dolby swoosh. I am like anybody else, have been lured in by the promise of what the big guys, the commercial streamers and the commercial platforms could offer us. And this idea that I'm continually having to interrogate in myself that real success is somehow shinier than being at regional film festivals or being on PBS. This year has revealed, however, once again, something really important that I think it's really important to remember, that while I love a lot of our commercial platforms and I love the people who work them, see, I told you, I was just gonna run on, I can talk, me. That commercial media is that, it's commercial, it's a commodity over community. And you may feel bigger, but are you reaching the biggest audience and the right audience for you and your film? Who is getting your film into the public conversation and the public who needs to hear your vision? Who's gonna pay you at this moment in history to make your personal story film about your family, your experimental sound essay, your social issue investigation without requiring a celebrity attachment, a murder, or a brand gone bad? So while I do hope to make commercial work again in the future, and hopefully didn't piss anybody off just now in the room, I am a public media girl through and through, and I will say to you today that if you're a documentary filmmaker here today, public media is a funder, a partner, a platform, is the entity that's making the most serious, boundary-pushing, important work in the field. Just last night, I watched The Tuba Thieves, and alongside it premiered A Town Called Victoria, two projects that are essential conversations about how we engage with our communities. They're vastly different from each other in a formal approach. They both played here, and they're both going to be launching in public media. Which is not to say it's perfect. There are conversations that need to be had or starting to be had in some cases about subject compensation, ethical budgeting, marketing and press dollars, the chokehold of one septuagenarian archival pan and scanner on historical documentaries. And my direct plea to PBS that it's time to invest in being cool. We need to pull the cultural zeitgeist and energy that's right now with the young people about the union organizing, mutual aid and solidarity onto the channel that our grandmother watches Antiques Roadshow on. Public media is cool, but we need to make sure that everybody knows it's cool and move ourselves towards more younger and more diverse audiences across a wider variety of platforms for the public good to bring more eyeballs to public media. I'm almost done, Miranda. Later today, I'm going to moderate a panel on distribution in the current landscape, and some of the conversations you're going to see or have today are going to be in the context that it's tough right now for documentary filmmakers. Funding's been moving more slowly, sales more slowly. It's going to be harder to get your project off the ground this year than it has been in the past 5 to 6 years. That's the reality. But that reality presents the opportunity to better define what you are in it for. What you want out of this career, this art form, this business, this compulsion. Making documentaries is really hard, and when it gets hard, you have to think about what and who you're creating it for. For me, I'm doing this for y'all. Y'all are my public, and your communities are my public. And for the people in audience who make up this diverse, dirty, fertile-fetid, complicated, beautiful region that we call the American South, the fate of which I believe defines the success of the American project. I'm making films to hold ourselves and other Americans accountable, films that showcase the joy, the tragedy, and absurdity of these places, and to hopefully engage the public who watches our films in their own projects of narrative change. I hope today is full of great conversations and ideas, and that you take this opportunity to set out on Climb the Mountain that is the long, arduous process of bringing your documentary to your public, to consider who and what you're doing this for, and how you can craft a story that reaches the public that you want to engage and presses forward the conversation of the public square. Thank you. I want to thank everybody at Hot Springs Doc Film Festival, especially the staff and the volunteers, for being here today, and I hope y'all have a beautiful day.